What's up, folks? How y'all doing? You're in the Kenneth McLaurin Comedy Room. I'm Kenneth McLaurin, and today we got my man Josh Homer in the building. What's up, Josh?
Hey, how's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. I can't complain. Can always get worse. Can always get better, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, Josh is a comedian from New Jersey, right?
I'm originally from New Jersey. Pretty much all the comedy that I've ever done has been in New York City, though. So
Okay.
I was born and raised in Jersey. I went to college at Rutgers, and I got on stage probably a little bit after getting out of Rutgers at the Stress Factory in New Jersey. I did their open mic, and then the next week I did a spot in New York, and I've been basically doing spots in New York ever since.
So, how long has that been?
It's about 7.5 years.
Okay, 7.5 years. So you know a lot about comedy, yeah?
I wouldn't say I know a lot. I know some, but you work alongside people in New York who have been doing this for 25, 30 years, and I know enough that I can get by, but I don't know as much as those guys and ladies. They're on a different level the way they do comedy.
I understand. So, why'd you get into comedy?
It's something that I've always wanted to do. I mean, I can't even explain. And I used to watch George Wallace.
Okay, I know George Wallace. You taking us back in the day with him.
Well, I was a little kid at the time, 4 or 5 years old. Like, that's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted. I used to know George Wallace's HBO special by heart at like 6 years old. I knew the whole thing. You saw me in China yesterday. You saw, I the whole thing, and it was just something that I loved. Like from just being a little kid, I always wanted to do it.
So tell me about your first experience on stage. Was it a good one, a bad one?
Oh man, my first time on stage, it was an open mic at the Stress Factory, like I said, and it was like everybody's first experience. I was nervous, and me being nervous, it made me curse a lot, which I normally, I don't really curse, but when you're up there, your mind is going so much, and you don't have any experience to fall back on. So I'm just like I just started, cursing a lot, and I made it through my 5 minutes.
Right.
I got heckled at the open mic by some other comedians who've been doing this longer than me. And, it was a tough thing. It was my first time on it. I'll never forget it. It wasn't a horrible experience, but it wasn't the best experience.
What's been your worst comedy experience?
Ooh, there's so many of those too. It's really bad. I mean, I've done like, regular things where I performed one time in front of a room where everybody in the room was Russian, and
Oh,
they all spoke Russian, and
oh,
the show was entirely in Russian except for me and the comedian after me. I was the feature, and the headliner was Joey Gay at the time. He was the headliner, and we spoke English. No one else. English was their second language, so we can't. The MC made fun of us in Russian. We didn't know what he said. We just noticed he said our names, and then he said something in Russian. Everyone laughed at us, and blah blah. It was an interesting gig. I got paid. I did my 20 minutes,
right.
but when it was over, I was just like, man, I'm not coming back here again. But then there's been horrible times. Like I've done some really rough shows. Like I did one show where a dude threatened to pull out a gun and kill everybody in the show.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like,
Y'all couldn't have been that bad, though, right?
no. Well, what happened was, the MC didn't have the skill set to handle a heckler, so he agitated this man. He just really just pushed him and pushed him. Then he put on a comic who's a friend of mine, who he was drunk at the time. He shouldn't have got on stage when he was drunk, and he didn't handle him because he was drunk. And then the MC got back on and just pushed him even further. And then the dude said, F all you people, I'm getting my gun. I'm going to get my gun. I'm going to shoot this place up. And the MC immediately went like this. Your next comic is Josh Homer. And the MC went to the back. Like he made himself scarce. And I had to go on stage to that. That was a horrible, it started off horrible, but it didn't, no one got shot. It ended okay. I got on stage, I talked to him, and I made some jokes, and he was really just upset because his mother had passed, and it was a lot
Oh,
of things went wrong. A lot of bad decisions were made that night to culminate in that. But at the end of the day, he ended up having a lot of fun, and he ended up. That was a regular show we ran every week. He ended up coming back almost every week.
Okay, well that's good.
Yeah, it ended nice, but at the time when he said he was getting his gun, everybody was like, "We about to die," on some comedy stuff.
Well, you know, man, hecklers and being heckled is something that's tough. It can be really tough for comedians, especially people just starting out. Do you have any advice on how people should deal with hecklers, or how do you do it?
Well, I mean, every heckler is different, but there's a comedian. His name is Jim Mendrinos. He taught me when I was just starting out. He said you got to understand why the heckler is heckling you, and that determines how you handle them. Some hecklers think they're helping you, and that they're part of the show. They're helping you put on a better show.
Right.
And if you destroy that person, if you just lay into them, the audience can see the maliciousness in you, and they can see that the person is just trying to be part of the show and they're not being bad.
Right.
Then you got people who are drunk. You can't attack a drunk person. Just really go after them because no one wants to see you beat up on a drunk person.
Okay.
So you have to assess each one. I mean, every now and then you'll get somebody who's just malicious and the gloves really can come off. But the easiest thing that I've found is the audience has come to see a show.
Right.
And it's very easy to point out the fact that this heckler is disrupting the show and taking away from what these people paid to see. Once you do that, the entire audience is against that person. And now it's very easy to shut them up because they feel embarrassed. They feel they shouldn't have spoke. The people in their party are telling them, all right, let it go. And then you can get back to doing comedy.
Okay. Okay, well, what has been your best experience doing stand-up comedy?
There's so many. I mean, I've met a lot of great people in this business. I mean, I got to talk to Chris Rock. That was an amazing experience, even though he said very little. An amazing thing to meet him. But one of the greatest things, an accomplishment that I had was I got to open for Richard Belzer. He picked me. He saw my tape. And he was doing a show in New York, and a friend of mine was producing it, and he said he needed an opener.
Right.
So a friend of mine was just like, well, I have some tapes, some comedians, if you want to look at them. And he saw my tape, and he was like, I'll take that guy. I like his comedy. I think he's funny. I'll take him.
Oh, and man.
I opened up for him. He made me wear a suit. It was in a theater. It was in a small theater. He made me wear a suit. He didn't have a suit on. No one in his band had a suit on. They were all casual, and I came out there in a all black suit, looking like a waiter. I had on leather shoes, a tie, everything. And I did.
Now, what piece of advice have you been given when you were first coming out that really helped you out?
Oh man, a really good friend of mine and a mentor. This guy, his name is Todd Land. He's done pretty much everything in comedy you can do. He said to me, "You got to write past the first draft."
Okay.
So you write a joke and you think it's good, throw it out. That's the first draft. And it seems like oh, I got this great joke, I got this good joke, but it's never as good as you think it is. In the first draft, if it came to you if it was easy that it came to you and it was something you thought of, another comedian probably already thought of it, and an audience member could think of it. And if an audience member beats you to the punch, if they know what you're going to say, then you're not really doing your job as a comedian. You're just as skilled as a civilian because a civilian beat you to that punch. Okay. So that was the thing he said to me: throw out that first draft. And go to the next, and you got to get to the third and fourth draft of your joke, and then your referencing will be more creative. The joke will be tighter, and it'll be a pinpoint as opposed to a shotgun blast joke, which was your first draft.
Tell me something you know now that you wish you would have learned a little sooner.
Ooh, in comedy, I mean, I honestly learned a lot my first year because I hung out with older people who were really, I don't want to use the term malicious, but they were very, very honest with me. So I got to learn a lot of facts and I got a lot of tools my first year. I wasn't skilled enough to use them. I'm still not skilled enough to use all of them.
Right.
I learned a lot from them in like my first couple years. Like I mentioned, Jim Andrinos, he's been doing this for 30 years now. And he was a gentleman who pulled me aside early on and just kind of gave me advice and everything like that. I mean, comedy's hard. I knew it was going to be hard. I wish I understood how hard it was going to be. That's the one thing. I wish I knew how hard it was. I knew it was going to be difficult. I didn't realize it was going to be this difficult.
Okay. Now, speaking about comics being truthful and factful, I really wanted to reach out and talk to you because of something you told me through Connected Comedians or the Connected Comedy website. Uh, One time I put a post about changing my act for a different audience. And you responded to me and you said, you shouldn't have to change your act for a different audience. If your material should be good enough, whether you're in an urban setting, whether you're in a regular comedy club setting, or wherever you are. You said it's about the point of view, your POV. And maybe you could talk a little bit about how point of view comes in as a comedian. What's the best way to try to work it and perfect your own point of view and use that to get your audience on board with you?
All right, that's a couple different questions. We'll start with the first one. I remember that you talked about you did an urban room, and what you did was you, instead of doing material, you were like, I'm going to branch off and I'm going to make fun of the food. I'm going to make fun of the establishment. I'm going to make fun of this, and then try to bring them in. And what I said is, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're stepping away from your material and you're using certain tricks that are always going to work, and they don't allow you to grow. You have to bomb, every now and then. You have to fail in order to become great. I mean, Richard Pryor used to walk people all the time. That was his intent, was to go in there and just push himself out of his comfort zone. And because of that, he became Richard Pryor. He became one of the greatest comedians of all time because he didn't use tricks. When you do rooms and you make fun of someone in the front and you make fun of this, what you're doing is you're not really relying on your writing. You're relying on a shared experience that's happening right then.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Instead of you pulling the audience into your experiences, you're going into theirs and you're letting them dictate your comedy. And in the long run, that can't help you. You can't get on Letterman and do that. You can't get on Leno and do that. You can't do a half-hour Comedy Central Presents and talk about the food in the theater and talk about this. You have to have your comedy stand on its own. And if your comedy, and I've done, you said it was an urban room. I've done urban rooms, like I mentioned earlier, where the dude said he's going to get a gun. And it's if your material is tight and you pull them into you, you don't have to talk about anything else. So that was the first thing. The second thing is point of view and how that affects your material and your stage persona. I mean, I don't have all the answers to that because I'm still on that path trying to develop my point of view.
Right.
But I see comics in all around who have a very... The phrase that I like to use is no matter what they're talking about, they're telling you about themselves. So like Chris Rock's point of view is he's angry and frustrated. So every joke that he does, there's gonna be an anger and a frustration to it. And so the audience knows what to expect from him, and they want that. They crave it because they understand what he's gonna do. Lewis Black is the same way. You know what Lewis Black is. He's a frustrated person. He can't understand how people can be idiots in this world. And because of that, the audience recognizes. They know a Lewis Black joke. They know a Chris Rock joke. They know a Louis C.K. joke because those jokes are written to their point of view, their outlook on life.
Right. Okay.
And once you develop that, once you get that, writing your jokes is so much easier. Because as it stands right now for you and I, like when we see something, we're like, that's strange, that's odd, there's a joke there, I should write about that. And then you sit down and you think, okay, how do I attack this? What is the funny in this? Whereas Chris Rock can see the exact same thing, and because his stage persona is angry and frustrated, he knows I need to attack this thing from a place of anger and frustration. So what about it's weird. It tickles me a little bit, but how does that thing make me angry and frustrated? And then he can write a bit about black people versus niggas because there's the race relations frustrated and angered him. So he wrote it from that place, and then you get a great bit. You get a bit that only you can do, as opposed to another comic lifting it from you and doing it themselves.
All right, man. That's gems of comedy knowledge. Anybody who's out here listening, I hope you had a notebook on that one. I hope you had a notebook for that one. So, what else do I want to talk to you about? You told me about who influenced you. Tell me a little bit about the New York comedy scene.
It's vicious. It's very. I mean, it's there's camaraderie, and then but it's also there's so many comedians here. There's a lot of shows. Like any given night, I can go out and get on 3 or 4 shows.
Right.
On any night. I personally I'm not in this big pool. I'm not a big enough fish that I'm passed at any of the major clubs. You have major clubs in New York, like you have Caroline's, which is a national headliner club, which the people who do Caroline's are like Patrice O'Neal, Louis C.K., Chris Rock, Tracy Jordan, like people who have television shows, they do Caroline's. And you have smaller clubs like Broadway Comedy Club, Gotham Comedy Club, and then other clubs pop up and close, like there was Comics and all that kind of stuff. And then below that you have some smaller comedy clubs like the Creek and the Cave, which is more alternative. You have Luna Lounge downtown, and then there's just bar shows everywhere. So on any night, there's probably at least, 20 shows going on in the city. Any night. And you may think, okay, 20 shows, 5 spots a show, that's 1,000 spots. It should be easy getting up. But then there are like 100,000 comedians. So it's a struggle. You're putting as much time as you're putting into writing, you have to put into emailing people and asking for spots and trying to finagle your way in. And then also it gets easier if you run a show yourself.
Right.
Because if you run a show, people will book you on their show, hoping that you'll book them. Or sometimes people just outright trade spots. and there's a lot of politics in it, but at the end of the day, if you're a good comic and you work hard, you will get up and you will be able to do your craft. If anything else, you'll get an open mic. There's a ton of open mics, 3 or 4 every night in New York. So you can always work. That's the great thing. And if you're willing to tape your sets and watch them and edit and critique and be honest about your comedy, you can grow so much as a comic in New York, just on stage time alone. In New York, at open mic, the audience is mostly comics.
Yes, I noticed that.
And the attitude at each open mic differs greatly. Like there are certain open mics that you go to where everyone knows each other and it's a very warm and friendly environment. And there are other open mics that you go to and you're like, am I going to get mugged here? Like, what is going on? And the way I used to tell which mics that I would do is the number of female comics who were there. It's serious. If there were a bunch of female comics at a mic, then the environment was more than likely friendly and welcoming. If there were no female comics at the mic, I knew that the female comics were like, I'm not coming here because this place is horrible. They don't respect women. Every joke is a rape joke. Everything. So those mics are bad. But if you know the right ones, it's a very healthy environment. But, since there's so many, there's so many bad ones.
I got you. I understand that. Well, I want to thank you for talking to me, man. Before we go ahead and let you get out of here, is there anything you want to tell anybody? Anything about things you have going on? Where can they see Josh Homer at? What you got in the mix?
I got a couple projects coming out right now. I'm working on a website called Sincerely Josh, which is I send out these letters to people 2 or 3 times a week. I also have this thing coming out called Homer at Home, which is a stay-at-home dad's website that gives an honest talk about being a stay-at-home parent. And then the final thing I got coming out in the next 2 months is this thing called the Minority Report.
Okay.
Which is It's basically issues that deal with minorities have to deal with that other media tends to overlook, and we're tackling them. It's me and about 3 other comics. We're tackling from a funny point of view, and we're talking about the problems that we have as minorities that just don't really get seen. So,
Okay, so where can we find you right now? You got a website up already yet?
yeah, my website is joshhomer.com.
And on Facebook, we hit you up at Josh Homer as well.
It's Josh Homer Comedy.
Josh Homer Comedy. I want to thank you again for sitting down with me in the Kenneth McLaurin Comedy Room.
Thank
Hey,
you.
folks, my man Josh Homer, check him out.